Trabalho na divisão de saneamento do banco baseada em Washington. Gostaria de parabenizar e cumprimentar os organizadores do evento, meus colegas da divisão.
My colleagues from the PPP and the support to be it's a pleasure to be moderating this. The new roads in the new regulatory sanitary landmark framework. We have very famous panel members with 2 decades of experience, and they have participated directly or indirectly. The PPPs, the most famous, like the one in 2007, one São Lourenço 2013, and River Manso. I'm certain we're going to have a very productive panel, and I'll try to be as summarized as possible so that we can make the best to use this panel. That is, it's going to be 40 minutes, and it's going to be Q&A. We have here the president of COPASA. It's an honor to have you here. He is from COPASA. We have Mario Azevedo, superintendent from SABESP. Mario, it's a pleasure here. We have Inês Coimbra. Inês, thank you so much for your participation and accepting our invitation. And we have Rosane, who is a lawyer from a law firm here in São Paulo. Pleasure to see you again. Now, the new regulatory framework says that until 2033, drinkable water has to be guaranteed for 99%, and sewage collection has to be also 99%, and the rational use of natural resources, among other aspects. To comply with this goal, the Ministry of Education said that it'll be necessary to have 140 billion in basic sanitation, which is more than $10 million per year. To make it easier, the law has free competition, flexibilization of irregular areas, and regionalization to facilitate the technical and financial possibility of the project, which is key in concessions. The challenges for the investments for private and public companies will be relevant. The innovation in management and commercial technique, instrumentation of innovative financing has a fundamental role in the investments in the times demanded in the new legal framework. Let us begin the panel suggesting a few bullet points to Carlos Eduardo. He's the president of COPASA. I will quickly read his resume. He's a civil engineer from the University of Juiz de Fora in strategic financing. He has a master in project financing, MBA with the Chicago School, and also worked for the executive financing for Kellogg's Cost, a course in governance, and also at Inspire University. He is the president. He has 20 years experience in this area. He worked as CFO in a large private company with sales over 2 billion BRLs. So COPASA is among the largest basic sanitation companies in Brazil. COPASA is a member of B3 and a member of the new market called Novo Mercado. If you could share with us, what are the challenges that you have faced as an executive in a public company? What are the business models? What changes in the competition of this company together with the private sector? How do you see the sustainable aspect? And I will now give the floor. Well, good afternoon, Maria Eduarda and colleagues in the panel. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm so glad to be here to have this panel so we can talk together. We have already been together to work for new alternatives for basic sanitation. At the time, in 2009 or 10, we never thought that we could have such a profound revision as the one that happened and is now tangible with this new Act 026. So we couldn't have a more adequate panel, and to have you as a moderator, because your experience can be summed 2 hours so that we can all discuss on the same ground level. I think that basic sanitation is going to be the big inflection in this area. So it happens after this new law, the efficient operators will remain in the area. This morning, I also participated in a panel where we discussed, and I hope that very soon we're going to stop speaking about public and private sanitation companies, because we can just speak of companies of sanitation, because in energy companies, people don't make a distinction of what is public and what is private. And I'm sure that this new act is going to bring this possibility. There are needs for huge investments, but there are huge opportunities, gigantic opportunities. So the best companies will remain. And I've had the opportunity to say that there's room for everyone, except for those that are inefficient.
Congelei.
He froze. Okay, thank you. We're going to wait for him, or shall we continue? I'm back, he's saying. I'm back. I'm sorry. Well, when you said that there's not going to be room for inefficient companies, I think this is a very important point, because in the end, you start applying the fact that public companies, everybody says they're inefficient. Well, I hope that those that are efficient will remain and going to what we expect, because we have to serve the user with quality, regularity, and fair price. So that is the big opportunity of transformation that this sector will bring. When we speak about competition, well, of course, the main companies, especially when we're talking about government-owned companies, and COPASA is a mixed company, will have a possibility of acting in a way under a different point of view. Because in the past, you had to compete in procedures of bids that are going to happen as of now to maintain their contracts. Of course, it's a challenge for a company that always used a tool, which is, it was, they just had to sign this with the municipality, and there was no other competition. And so there wasn't this opportunity. I think that we in COPASA, we are experiencing this, because transformations always implied in movements and things that we have to do to make the company go to another bar, raise the bar. So besides the consumers to expand, the company itself is going to benefit, because they're going to have opportunities besides let's say, advocating for the contracts they have, but they're going to have to see braver plans and act beyond their limits, which is something that used to be something unthinkable. Now, speaking about funding, new roads will be seen in COPASA besides the traditional funding, the classical funding lines with BNDES Development Bank or the Caixa Bank. They're very well accepted in the market. We have international credit lines as well, always trying to find a diversification. And now we're going to start with these international countries that are going to demand as a company as a whole this greener look. The greener look, as I said this morning, is that the conclusion, the unanimous conclusion, is that sanitation is ESG straight in your vein. So that is certainly going to be the star that guides us for new funding. So to try to be as brief as possible so we can hear all the other colleagues. So these are the first considerations I can make. I'm sorry, I apologize for the instability of my connection. Well, you were very punctual, and it gives us a few more minutes. So perhaps we're going to come back to this. Thank you, Carlos Eduardo, to speak about the future of the area, of the industry, a new landmark, and the clarity in how objective was your discourse and the way you explained. This contributed tremendously to our panel. Well, I'm going to ask some questions to the Superintendent of Resources for Investors at SABESP. He's responsible for corporative finance and fundraising at national level, international level, in the international capital market, and also relationship with investors. He's also in charge of PPP projects and other financing projects of structured projects. He graduated in economics by a university in São Paulo, and he had postgraduate in marketing and finance from a university, a business university in São Paulo. Well, SABESP is one of the largest companies in the world that has partnership with private companies to provide services and to sell and to use rainwater. What is the change in public companies if we consider the new framework with the new business opportunity? The participation of public companies, for example, in PPP auctions is something to be done. What is your vision about these topics? Mario, you have the floor. You have 10 minutes. Okay. Can the audience hear me? They're doing a thumbs up. Okay. So first of all, Maria, thank you very much, and IDB for the initiative, Carlos, and the possibility of being here and contributing here. So Carlos already said that Marco, this framework brings a new challenge for sanitation and for the public mixed capital companies that have done most of the basic sanitation. But when we think of opportunities, you even gave a list of what SABESP has already done. Well, SABESP has tested acting in the private sector to learn with the private sector. We have partnerships in the reuse of water, using land, and very often we work together with a private company to participate in the auctions, and we learned a lot. We learned mainly to have a structure for this, which is the company already has this. We already have a more robust structure to act in market expansion and new businesses. We also learned that we have to look at the whole and not only the market expansion. There are other markets, there are other activities that are related to the ESG, which are very important. We talk, in fact, Carlos, we are green since we were born, but we have a lot of negative externalities in the energy matrix, and we have a lot of sludge. All this, of course, is business. So from the point of view of opportunities, we have a market expansion out of the state, expansion in the state that makes sense, especially when Inês is going to talk about the different blocks. We say that the scale is king in our segment. So we have agglomerate hours bringing other blocks closer to us. So we have enormous opportunities in São Paulo. I think the company is well positioned to be able to be very strong. It's like COPASA. It's a very mature company with the relationship with the market. We don't have only 49.7 of the shares that are that are traded in the stock exchange, but most of our debt is with a private market. So I would like to congratulate COPASA with the fundraising. We also have expanded a lot in fundraising with infrastructure funds, because the matrix for funding for this industry, in my opinion, has not been solved yet, especially if we deal with a public company. So there is a restriction to access to public money. So diversification, taking the diversification is so important, but I don't only see this in the private company, or rather public, excuse me, says the speaker. They're going to also, public and private, you have to find, you're going to have exchange exposure, and exchange rates change, and you know, everything, when things start exploding in a positive way. I used to say, we're not competing in agro, but we compete in credit. So one thing that I believe in, I'd like to comment, I think it's interesting, Maria Eduarda, which is, while a company with mixed capital is subject to all the rules, when they say something that has happened in SABESP that I think should grow, it should bring dynamism to the mixed capital companies, which is the possibility of having a contract that we call a performance contract. Now, a performance contract is something that, please, Rosane, don't kill me for this, but it is a mini PPP. And this changes the paradigm of and the way you work with a productive chain, because on one side you have a lot of risk, credit risk, very heavy credit risk. So in this sense, the counterpart of this is that you're going to have more speed in your project and the possibility of incorporated innovation. This is very important. So SABESP had the pleasure of counting with Rosane at the PPP San Lorenzo, which I think that is really iconic. And I participated in the definition, in the rationalization of everything in the funding model. So PPP is good for the public. Okay, it's good for the public, but because it gives credit. But SABESP has credit. Why do we need a PPP if I have credit? My credit is cheaper than the one that's going to do the PPP. But then if you do the proper analysis of the risk of carrying out such a large project with so many fronts and so many bids, and the story of add-ons with prices and tariffs, if I put all this together, and if I leave some parts to be designed by the suppliers, they're going to bring the technology. So the São Lourenço PPP, among other things, was done in time, in the right schedule. In fact, it wasn't for the water crisis. It was being done. So there is room, Maria Eduarda, for innovation, independent of the nature of the company. And even being a mixed capital company, with new legislation 303 as it faces new forms of new contracts and contracting people. Of course, it makes it easier also to expand in the market, because if it's easier to have partnerships and associations, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but we're very well represented here by the two ladies, but this is the legal framework that changes, yes, for companies that have mixed capital, for public companies. But not only this is changing and improving, whatever, we don't know how this is going to progress in Brazil, but there are opportunities to develop as mixed capital as well as companies with private capital. In our case, the scale, the capacity of leveraging puts us in an interesting position. And what I would also like to say is that what you see, those that are joining in, the newcomers in the industry, this is a capital which is rather opportunistic. The cost of capital that is coming is low. So we see prices in auctions that are not going to remain as low as it is forever. a time will come when it's going to be normalized. Then it'll be more interesting for companies that are structured more for long term when you're talking about public companies with mixed capital. But this is a vision, which is my vision. I don't know. Do I still have time? No, you're right on time, Mario. Exactly the 10 minutes you were allotted. Thank you once more for complying to the time. And thank you for bringing so many interesting points. And what draws my opinion is the innovation in the PPPs and the innovation, the way SABESP is already dealing with this. Innovation, in fact, is not an end in itself, but it is a means to attain the goals of universalization, and looking at this in a holistic point of view from the technological, management point, financial point of view as well. So thank you very much for enriching our panel and for all your experience. Let us now give the floor to Dr. Inês Coimbra. I'm going to introduce her. She is a promoter of the state of São Paulo. She's a member of the supervision team of land for the state of São Paulo. Inês, who has been working with legal assistance in the modeling of PPP of interest, social interest for the program. She's also a legal counsel for water and energy in the state, and she works in the office of the state promoter that gives legal counseling in strategic issues. Well, Dr. Inês, it's a pleasure to meet you. Now, the governor of São Paulo passed a law 17,833 that includes basic sanitation for certain regions according to the law. In 2020, with a new system for sanitation, we're going to have 4 areas for drinkable water and sewage with 230, center lots of municipality, in the north 142 municipalities. What was the logic to have these regional areas, and how did it work with subsidy and social justice?
Yeah, I'm going to remove the headphones or else I'll keep hearing myself in another language. To bring some context, this new framework considers a regionalized service rendering. And this new framework has follows several theoretical bases. This regionalized, this localized offering of services has to do with gains of scale, the universalization of the service, and the economic feasibility of the sanitation system. So this new framework brings 3 different forms of regionalized service: metropolitan areas and urban conglomerates. This is something that we're familiar with. But another 2 new forms that are the rural units of sanitation and the reference blocks. Those are created by state law, the second form. And the third one, in case states do not create them, the federal government can. Why? Because this new framework gives some protagonism to the states so as to facilitate a more regional approach, and sees the state government as more appropriate to be in charge of that instead of the federal government. The federal government will only act residually in case the states do not act. And some ideas were taken into consideration when this decision was made. So the state will apply the same law the whole country will, but here in São Paulo, with a very sound sanitation company. So this is a challenge because it's one single law for the whole country. The reality here in São Paulo is not the reality of the country. And the geographic location of the municipalities, the water basins, how close they are, how feasible the rendering of service is, and the financial sustainability of the service. These are all the factors to be taken into consideration. And so we used the indicators that are in this 2019 basis that had indicators for almost every municipality in the state. Of course, it was just a reference, but we had to have a starting point. And many indicators were considered, like the financial performance indicator for each municipality, and some quality indicators as well, qualitative indicators. So this new law, it uses some ideas of this new framework, but not only to expand the service, but also to expand the quality of the service. We know that a universal system will only come when there is high quality in the service. And so environmental concerns were included, loss prevention, also encouraging the use of wastewater and prices. Some those were concerns that were taken into consideration by the law. So this state law was recently detailed by a state decree. It provides for the governance and also the statute of metropolis. And considering the size of each municipality that is part of each unit. But what it seems to me is that we're advancing these new forms, these new regionalized forms, these new forms to organize the municipalities is a new step that the sanitation legal framework had already provided for, but it adds a very interesting this state management of the system. And we know that the federation will have to work as a group, and sanitation, I believe, will be a major challenge for all the states to work together. The states play a very important role as coordinators and articulators of these new forms. Time will tell how this will develop, but the mindset was to design groups that make sense technically, logistically, but also keeping in mind the financial sustainability of the service. I can imagine that it must have been very challenging. Thank you so much for sharing all the rationale. It is a very important and very interesting knowledge. Now we have Dr. Rosane. She has been mentioned a few times already, and she is an attorney, graduated by the Catholic University, MBA from Getúlio Vargas Foundation, very active in the areas of mobility and infrastructure. I didn't know you had been a part of the infrastructuring of São Lourenço. I didn't know that, but she's been working a lot in contract modeling, participation and guarantee contracts. She also provides legal services for regulated services. It is so good to see you, Rosane. You who you're so active in both sides. So what are the challenges? What are the challenges for the enforcement and the implementation of this law? You have the floor now, and I am sure you are very knowledgeable, and you will be, we're very anxious to hear what you have to say. Can you all hear me? Yeah? Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Duda for her very kind words. It's a shame we're not together in person. Hopefully next time we will be. I would like to thank everyone for the very warm welcome on behalf of the whole IDB here in the person of Carolina. And I was thinking that, well, I'm glad Inês will be speaking before me, because she'll be talking a lot about laws, and I knew it could be a little tiring, and I know people fear when lawyers are too theoretical. I'll try not to be. But when you ask me about the challenges of implementing this law, I can't not mention this recent discussion. The Supreme Court decision that everyone expected, had high expectations, and we're not here discussing public sector or private sector. We're discussing sanitation service. To be very honest, I did not watch all the session because it went on for days. I counted on the input of some colleagues, but I'd like to mention some aspects. I think it was a very positive rendering. This is this final decision that determines that this law is constitutional, and always focusing on two major themes. That is the possibility of extending the impossibility of celebrating the impossibility of signing new contracts, and also the National Agency of Waters, its autonomy and competence has been detailed. I believe that the decision as a whole was very good, but did not address some details. I think it's very important. It does bring a lot of legal certainty, especially for the newcomers who are now investing in Brazil for the first time. But there's more to that. And I don't think it includes everything, because there is a legal remedy that was filed in the Supreme Court that addresses some very concrete points. The methodology of proving the economic soundness of the state-owned companies. So the Supreme Court ruling helps a lot, but does not solve everything. What is still under discussion is extending the program contracts by means of a rebalancing contract so as to meet the goals of the law, the goals that are provided for in the law. Also, the delay. It took a long time. It took a long time for the administration to take action. In terms of improving the economic soundness of those companies. Finally, there's something very important, that is limiting to 25% the subdelegation of services. In this new framework, it is stated that there is this limit, but then the decree to regulate the law included more than just the delegation of service. It also included delegation by means of PPPs. It's like the decree, the regulatory decree went beyond the law, and now there's this discussion. The question is, does it apply? Did it apply to PPPs? That was discussed in the state of Rio Grande do Sul first, and then it was determined that 25% cap did not apply to PPPs. But now there's this stated in the decree now, and we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait to see what will happen with these three major points that I believe to be the most relevant ones. Of course, there will have to be some improvements, some detailing, but there's something else that I would like to add to our discussion. In the Supreme Court ruling, a lot was said about the National Agency of Waters and their authority to issue standards and rules, and the discussion was only reference rules or general rules, because general rules, they would have to be broader, and the Supreme Court said no, reference rules that are not binding. So now when we think of this agency, National Agency of Waters, and the rates charged for solid residues collection, we have now to determine what the indicator will be to determine if the state companies are achieving the goals. Those are two different norms, and they're very different in their origin. What I understand from the Supreme Court ruling is that precisely because they're not binding, maybe the National Agency of Waters will be able to detail some more. But then it will be up to the municipality to decide if they will comply with the norms or not. I did take some more notes of what I wanted to discuss, but I guess it's enough for now. Let's continue with the debate. Thank you so much for your comments, Rosane. You're such an experienced professional in this area. I see that our time is coming to an end, but this has been a very, very fruitful discussion, discussing all the challenges to meet the green financing, environmental targets, everything that will be required in order to have these investments, especially now post-pandemic. Carlos Eduardo, I'd like to express my deepest thanks for having you with us. Also, Sampaio, Inês, Coimbra, Rosane, thank you all so much for being part of this panel, and I hope to see you all soon. Thank you so much, Duda. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. I would like to thank everyone, and unfortunately our time was limited, but because after all the comments from the colleagues to my comments, well, I would have a lot more to say, but I would just like to thank the IDB who supports sanitation action so much, especially here in São Paulo, in several different fronts. I would also like to thank my colleagues here in the panel and everyone who watched us. Thank you for the invitation. Congratulations on organizing such a nice event, such interesting topics, such great professionals. Again, I encourage you all to check the Palace website and take the cultural tour. Well, my battery is dead, so I no longer have my headphones with me. Anyways, I'll just express my thanks also. Thank you so much for putting this together. One thing I wanted to say, I recently attended a conference where sanitation was discussed, and someone said, I can't find engineers, specialized companies. I need to hire them and I just can't find them. And someone said, well, it's a good problem to have. And I thought of my beloved father, who was a sanitation engineer also. And I'm sure we will be able to catch up with all this demand. And I will make sure I take the tour that you mentioned, the cultural tour. Thank you all so much.